Black magic doesn't just affect people. Most perform black magic every single day without even realizing it. And it happens the moment that consciousness attempts to produce external results without first embodying the internal process required to sustain it. And this naturally becomes an inversion of natural law. So we are creating from a place where we are actually deeply disconnected from the self and the very source that we're an extension of. It's the moment that we see ourselves as separate from the very source in which we seek. This is when the external symbol begins replacing the internal transformation. Have you ever heard the saying of, you cannot stick butterfly wings on a caterpillar and expect it to fly? This is like a tree without roots. When the storm comes by, what's going to happen? It will destabilize and crumble because it never had the internal foundation to sustain the very experience that it wanted in order to be able to dive into the realm of, let's just say, soul liberation. It's missing the soul element. One inversion of natural law would be somebody desiring to create the appearance of strength without first building the internal strength within them. So instead of cultivating discipline, emotional maturity, nervous system regulation, and that embodiment, they begin becoming obsessed with creating this image or projecting this archetype of strength instead of creating that within themselves. Instead of becoming strong mentally, becoming strong emotionally, becoming strong energetically before it translates into the physical realm, there is this shortcut that happens. And so everything becomes about appearing more evolved or strong instead of actually cultivating this internal strength within them. And that can manifest through exaggerated emotions or responses, maybe even like physical modifications that someone undergoes without actually cultivating that alchemical process required for you to reach that unbreakable archetype of what strength actually looks like embodied from within, so without. This is the saying of a tree cannot fake its roots. You can paint the tree gold, you can glue fruit onto the branches, you can wrap that tree trunk with fairy lights, but guess what happens when the storm comes about? It's going to completely collapse under pressure because it doesn't have the foundation to sustain it. It's not rooted in that way of being. It has not yet embodied that internal strength. So when it's put up to trials and tribulations in the external realm, it's going to crumble under pressure. These inversions of natural order are the first step of us becoming parasitic to ourselves. It's when somebody tries to force abundance in their life without first cultivating this strong sense of internal stability. Somebody wears the costume of understanding and enlightenment without first understanding and integrating their own life experiences from the perspective of the soul. That's what it is to become enlightened. It's to see life through the lens of a light being. This looks like someone forcing love without first cultivating this deep, profound sense of self-acceptance of the self and even the shadow. And so there is this external symbolic archetype of strength without this internal discipline. And that's what the real spiritual work is, right? It's like everyone wants to heal until it requires discipline and accountability. So that's what parts of, inversions of natural order would actually look like. The reason the inversions of natural law become parasitic to us is because instead of generating this energy from this natural state of coherence, the human becomes dependent upon the external world, right? It begins projecting its internal power upon seeking external approval, applause, validation, stimulation, or the internal state of being dependent upon the results of the material physical plane, and that governing, whether your peace be something that you find only when you receive this thing from the external. That is parasitic because we then create this identity that becomes dependent upon this external projection, illusion. And the reason being, I'll create a chart of the centrifugal versus the centripetal state of life force flowing, is because life force stops moving inside outwardly and instead becomes attached to extracting energy from the external world in order to sustain itself. And we hear this when we talk about parasites. So the 𝓫𝓬𝓫 body begins spinning in the opposite direction, and that's also what creates the illusion of the reptilian tail, because it actually doesn't have enough energy to upcycle back on itself because it's too entangled with the physical external world. So instead of becoming an inward and upward expansion towards harmony, it becomes this centrifugal inversion towards things like material obsession or this egoic projection, where we create this identity based off of survival and fragmentation from the source that we are. And we begin seeking this external source. This is the moment that energy begins moving outwardly, compulsively, instead of inwardly, consciously. And that's why so many people come into this spiritual awakening or remembering, and they understand it intellectually, but then they never actually understand it and embody that very teaching. That's why there's a difference between knowing the path and actively walking the path. It requires a level of mastery in spirit navigating the physical realm and understanding the mechanics and the embodiment that actually requires. It can also be where there's this inversion of being too overactive in the feminine and unactive in the masculine, which would look like dwelling in abstract spiritual concepts and having this passive awareness and this level of love and light without that order, that discipline, that structure of being able to embody that in the material plane, where you just dwell on these higher concepts without actually grounding them into physical application and how you navigate this construct. So that's going to happen through organization and how you choose to create that embodied transformation of the soul in physical form. This is where we see spiritual knowledge end up becoming performance instead of something that's embodied in your everyday lived experience. It's something that we kind of put on a pedestal or we aspire to be instead of remembering ourselves as a spiritual being having a human experience instead of just a human being having these spiritual experiences. These inversions of truth can look like somebody obsessing about appearing wealthy in the material plane without first cultivating the internal discipline required to create that stability as a foundation in their life. It can also look like someone who wants to adopt this spiritual identity without first addressing their unresolved pain, and maybe even someone who constantly speaks about consciousness while still completely being controlled by their unprocessed emotions or their unconscious patterns. All these inversions of natural law show us one congruent theme, and that is transformation that the human is desiring, but there is also a strong resistance to the discomfort that is required, right? Temporal discomfort for the actual transformation to unfold. Much like the caterpillar that desires to become a butterfly, but just wants external wings as a shortcut to be stuck on it, and then thinking that that's going to help it fly. No, it has to go through the internal transformation of becoming liquefied so that it can begin to experience life in a completely different way. And that is true embodiment that then manifests as the, in the external as a natural side effect, right? It's internal to external. It's not external quick fix that's wear the costume of this thing, but then there is no substance to it. Those are inversions of truth. You're creating from being disconnected to your own power and what you actually have the potential of becoming. Which is just, it's so funny, right? So imagine plugging yourself into all of these external, thousands of power outlets, all these external batteries, because you forgot that you were actually the source. You forgot that you had this generator within you. And that's what happens when your consciousness begins to disconnect from its own life force and instead becomes dependent upon these external systems, right? Whether that's to feel worthy or to feel loved or validated or accepted and or complete, instead of realizing that you actually complete yourself. This is when the dormant human disconnects from its own true nature and forgets the law of energetic exchange, because all exchange is energetic and all creation is exchange with the world around us, right? Even the third dimension that we're co-creating with. This is where we have an exchange of emotion or attention or intention and creative life force. When the root becomes fragmented through fear, shame, trauma, self-hatred, judgment, or survival conditioning, and this internal conflict, the clear intention becomes distorted. So creative life force then becomes unconsciously redirected into loops of escapism and projection, manipulation, this performance, and essentially the spiritual inflation. This is because the natural movement of consciousness is always ascending, it's always evolving and expanding. You are always evolving through your multidimensional bubble. And there is actually no such thing as to descend. What can happen is that we can create blocks that can just block the flow of life force flowing through us, and so that begins to scatter our energy, and that usually happens when we are disconnected from our own power, where we are creating from that place where we are disconnected from our own true nature. And so we can fall out of our innate expression and these natural cycles and rhythms of nature itself. And the thing is, the further that consciousness begins to fall out of harmony with itself, the more distorted its vision becomes, the more distortion it sees this reality through, and it interrupts the way that the being actually sees themselves as well and their own potential in this realm. That distortion ends up creating this inversion of natural law and order. You can think about it as, there was like an example that I was wanting to come through, a being that falls out of electrical communication with its source, begins to fall out of alignment and go into this path of, self-destruction essentially. But anything that falls into decoherence can actually fall back into coherence as it restores electrical communication with its source or its battery pack or its internal generator, right? It's truth and the true nature of your being something that is internal. It's not going to be found external. The universe often pulls these things externally away from us, not to pull them away, but to actually redirect our focus inwards to remember what it is that we've always been. So when we stop externalizing our power and instead we begin embodying our power, we stop performing this transformation and instead actually begin embodying it and living it and becoming a living example of what it looks like to create more efficiently and effectively than having this scattered life force essentially in the system. Because what happens when we have those disruptions of life force flowing through us is that it scatters our creative potential and ability. All of us is not here with us, and so we are creating from this depleted place. The reason I was called to share this message today is because of a vision that I received last night of essentially the house of cards falling. Now, when I talk about the house of cards, it's not just the inversions of anything that's not built on a sustainable foundation within ourselves, but also these larger systems within this collective field and also construct, all right? A lot to do with just these larger communal groups within that play with the inversions of natural order and law. Let's just say that we're going to see a lot of things in the world stage where the house of cards will be falling. And so anything that's built on these inversions of truth have these compromisations within their foundation, which means that it will eventually reveal itself in the end, all right? That's when the curtains are pulled back and we see the man with the puppet strings behind the veil that was pulling the strings all along. The reason I'm sharing this for your own subjective journey is because it's going to explain the reason why the universe can't give you everything that you want straight away. You're literally being prepared to receive more, and that means that you have to become the version of self internally first before you can receive it in the external world. So let's say this man wants to appear super powerful, right? He wants to be the CEO. So he wants the office, the title, the status, maybe the money. And he wants to first attain it in the external world before he actually embodies the characteristics, traits, the discipline that's required in order to maintain this reality. And now he enters into this reality, and somehow there's a frequency gap between the reality that he's in and the actual version of self that he is. This is the moment that we begin to feel like we have this level of imposter syndrome or this instability. Maybe there's this disorganized characteristic that he has not yet resolved within himself. And so there's fear. There's an inability to guide people coherently through this field because he doesn't have any experience in it. Well, what's going to happen? Well, when he steps into the office, there is this frequency gap between what reality requires for him to do and to embody. I've got low battery right now. And the version of self that he actually is. And it's because he's not yet cultivated the nervous system, he hasn't cultivated the discipline, the maturity, the embodiment, or the internal architecture that's required in order for him to sustain the reality that he's now forced himself into. And eventually that structure or that world begins collapsing like a house of cards underneath the weight of the incoherence operating within his system. And those are laws of the inversion of nature. This is because the external world can mirror that inner transformation, but it can never replace it. And you're being called to literally become the version of self so that you can create reality from the inside out. It's as above, so below. Now, let me go ahead and I'm just going to get my charger. I need to charge my battery, and we're going to do a quick reading around the inversions of natural order and see what it is that you're being called to embody more of. I mean, I have 9% right now, so let's go. Let's see what comes through. It's just important. We have 11:11 on the clock, so it could be something that you're wishing for, right? It could be definitely something that you're wishing for, something that's being seeded. Right, your message is star gathering, stars align, remembering home, soul family. This could be about connection, knowing that all external networks lead you back towards your internal networks and etheric origins. That's what this is. There could be something in order to receive this support, first of all, from star family and terrestrial connections. We must first establish that reconnection within ourselves. Right, this talks about something powerful looking up in the midnight sky. This card reminds us that we have star power and star potential, and we are not the only star in the world. For when we switch on our light, we attract more star energy and even our own star family. The stars have aligned and you found the lost pieces of yourself, and your energy is now time to shine. You're magnetic and attracting people and energies and opportunities that will allow your dreams to unfold. The thing is, you will not attract what it is that you desire. You will attract what it is that you are. And so if you are someone that is deeply aligned with themselves, deeply aligned with, again, welcome home, right? Soul family, welcome home to a home away from home, because you're remembering the one infinite field of consciousness, the one infinite field of information that we all emerge from, all children of light within this system, learning to return to that wisdom once again, then you'll recognize that you're never alone in this process, right? There is a level of coherence that you have. There is a level of source that you can return to that allows you to feel at home wherever you are. Naturally, you'll see those external networks begin to mirror the internal networks that you already established when it comes to the connection that you have to your own etheric origins. So this is a time of wishes fulfillment. Your dedication, focus, and dreaming has paid off, and now you can reap the rewards. It's important for you to know that this plane of existence is your rightful plane, and not to spend too much time trying to transcend this reality, for you've chosen to be here at this time. Make the most of this powerful opportunity, and if you're feeling particularly connected to certain individuals at this time, it's because you're finding your star family, beings you connected with before you entered this cycle of incarnation. And as long as you're connected to yourself, you are home, right? That's the main takeaway. Being connected to yourself as you move through this system allows you to be at home while inside of it and create from this place of connection. Let me go and get a advice message for you. The advice message is constellation, so a lot to do with star family. We have retrograde and optical doubles. Optical doubles talks about the illusion of something being really close together, but in actuality, it's really far apart, okay? So it talks about the distance between you and something else, and then we have retrograde. Retrograde talks about the illusion of going backwards. So again, it's the illusion of descent, where we've fallen out of natural order and we begin to bring ourselves back into natural order. This with optical doubles is feeling like everything outside of you is separate from you instead of an extension and expression of you. Constellation is connecting the dots of you are everything, everything is you. You're not just this localized point in the field, but you are the field experiencing you as a localized point through space-time. So constellation is literally the constellation of selves that you are. I'm hearing the constellation of cells. So everything is, you are one of the many cells of source remembering themselves, right? Fractal awareness becoming conscious of itself through this system. And that natural place of coherence is allowing you to move through this system, always remembering that you are connected to everything. And that's one of the desires that you have. And as long as you're creating from that place, as long as you're seated in that remembrance, you're in alignment and flowing with the natural order and not the inversion of it. Go nowhere, because that's where everything is. When you stop seeking or searching, you find everything. You find yourself in everything, and everything in you. Have fun. So I'm gonna love any of you right there. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, do consider subscribing. We'd love to have you around. It was such a cool subject matter, really, really important to touch on. And yeah, let me know, where was there an inversion? Because we were, you know, we've incarnated into many lineages here on this planet, and encoded within our avatar have been many of these inversions of natural order. And this is, you know, it's weaving down like societal conditioning and constructs and just the conditioning of the world that we take on. But you're returning to whom you were before your conditioning, essentially. What have you been able to, what currents, reversal currents have you been able to reverse back into natural order in this system? And these were many reinforced thought forms I'm seeing that created this momentum that you're now redirecting and shifting in this lifetime. Let me know what that is for you. So I'll speak to you very soon. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, again, do consider subscribing. I'd love to be around. Personal reading details are also down below. Also check out Spirit if you're looking for some high quality AAE grade jewelry. You have 2 discount codes for that in the description box. 1 of the proceeds are donated towards Sanctuaries. And until next time, bye.